Hello, I'm Tammy Saltzman. Welcome back to Divorce Connection Network. Today we have Scott Solkoff. Hi, Scott.
Hello.
He's back again, and we're going to finish up the second segment, the second half of our segment called 50 Shades of Grey Divorce. And we are going to be recapping just a little bit. We talked about what is elder care, and we determined that elder care is asset protection and planning protection, and a long-term care protection is a big part of it.
A big part of it.
And then we briefly talked about the definition of what is a grey divorce. So those types of divorces are usually second marriages. I find 95% of those marriages are second marriages. And we talked a little bit about some of the reasons why people who are elderly would consider a divorce. So we talked a little bit about wanting to live in separate assisted living communities. We talked a little bit about children from former marriages draining assets from the marriage. And we also talked briefly about the most important issue, which is I have $3 million, my spouse only has $1 million, and what happens when his million runs out? Is the government going to come after my millions? And how do I protect myself short of getting a divorce? You know, one of the things that I thought about when we were on break, that some of the divorces that I've seen due to the Medicaid issue, they actually stay together. They're just getting divorced on paper, but they're not necessarily splitting apart.
Oh, and the fact is that they don't have to get divorced to protect their assets.
That's really important. If you're listening carefully, you know me. You know I always am trying to save marriages. Divorce should be your last resort. So why don't you tell our seniors who are watching, who are contemplating divorce, how they might properly plan? We were talking about back to common law, right? So why don't you give the audience some tips and ideas of what they can do to properly plan so that they don't have to worry about this issue?
Okay, well, one thing comes to mind as you were speaking, and what I see often as a reason for divorce, a grey divorce, is actually caregiver fatigue. And this is...
Wow, I can relate to that, yes.
Look, when people get married, first marriage, second marriage, but you're right, often in second marriages, there's a difference. I'm not sure how. But when a person is healthy and fine and life is good and we're planning for the future and we're able to support each other and be there for each other, that's one sense of marriage. It's a completely different sense of the couple. But when one spouse gets sick and maybe comes down with dementia, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, some long-term illness, it can be very tough for the spouse where everything was fine and good, but now she or he has become a caregiver. And the stress of caregiving is tremendous. So I would just say this, rather than spending too much time on that point, although I can talk about caregiving stress for a long time.
I can personally relate, so I get it, yes.
A big part of it, a big part of mitigating that and avoiding divorce and being able to stand by each other in sickness and in health is the ability to reach out and get help. There are so many community resources, in addition to professionals like you and I, so many community resources that can be gotten to reduce that caregiving stress to a point where it is so manageable that people can stay with each other and feel good about it. Now, having said that, another issue is, as you said, long-term care asset protection planning. Money buys care. And so if we don't have dollars, we can't get the care that we need, not only for our spouse, but for us, and to live on for the rest of the surviving spouse's life. So a big part of elder law is looking at the rules and laws and coming up with legal, ethical, moral ways of protecting those savings so that we can qualify the ill spouse for Medicaid, make sure that the well spouse can also get Medicaid and or VA benefits, and therefore have a higher quality of life, because now we have more money buys more care. So what we were talking about before the break was the ability of a spouse to protect his or her assets against the cost of the other spouse's health care. And we do that through a program of, again, shifting assets from one spouse to the other sometimes, or one spouse, after the other spouse's assets are spent, being able to legally secure those assets in a way that the government can't count them. And I mentioned the common law doctrine, and really what this all comes down to is recognizing that spouses do have the right to have separate assets, to have separate needs. And we have successfully argued that point to the government. And on January 1st of 2005, we filed the first application using this theory. The government fought us on it, but ultimately the law is the law, and we've won. And those cases, now we've helped hundreds of clients, hundreds of couples through that issue. But the idea is to be able to set this up in a way where we can avoid divorce, if at all possible. I would think, and I think you would agree with me, because I've heard you speak on the subject many times, if we can avoid divorce, divorce should be, if there really are, irreconcilable differences.
Right. It's your last resort. I didn't want to get divorced, and I felt that my vows meant something. You go before a rabbi, you're under a chuppah, you have a ketubah, and supposedly it's supposed to last forever. Nobody thinks that things are going to change, or that people are going to outgrow each other, or that, one person is going to not be happy in the relationship anymore and maybe go outside the marriage. There's so many reasons people get divorced, but specifically to this gray divorce, the older people, I find that this Medicaid issue, they're obsessed with it.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that Medicaid will pay for even the Rolls Royce of nursing homes. It'll pay for home care, assisted living care, and most people think that Medicaid is just for poor people. Well, that's Medicaid health insurance. Long-term care side of Medicaid is important for the middle class and the upper middle class too, because we're going to get wiped out otherwise.
We are, and there's a lot of things moving in that direction right now, especially right after our elections. So we have to try to figure out ways to protect ourselves and to protect you. When you come to a divorce attorney, we are really only going to be able to do what's called a postnuptial agreement, and I'm sure you've seen these. We also do prenuptial agreements, and I'm a lot more savvy now that I've gone through this elder divorce, and several of them, where I might reach out to someone like Scott and say, how do I protect my spouse's assets if her spouse or his spouse gets ill and their assets are drained? Is there language that we would be able to use in our agreements that would protect them, or they would still need additional protection?
Well, they still need additional protection, but there are absolutely things that can be done in nuptial agreements, whether prenuptial agreements or postnuptial agreements, that will help me help my clients. And one of those issues, simply put, is provision about the division of health care costs. And to be able to say in the document, I'm not responsible for your health care costs, you're not responsible for my health care costs. And even though most nuptial agreements say a broader, what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine, in a Medicaid world, if I have that specific language, it does help me with the government.
And that's important. So when you're practicing in your practice, you'll actually not just draft the necessary protection documents, but actually advocate to the government for your client's rights. Is that correct?
Oh, we need to, yes. The government is not the client's friend in this process. They're looking for reasons to keep them out of the system. And so really it's a matter of explaining to the government why we did what we did and why it's legal. We open our books to the government, but oftentimes they don't know their own rules and laws.
Going back to what you said earlier, you said there are legal ways to protect your asset. I want to make sure the audience understands how important it is that you do things legally and properly, and you consult with the right professionals who understand the language and the details. A lot of people think that they can hide their assets on their own, or they could give all their money to their children who are going to hold it in trust for them somehow. And they make bad mistakes that could be irreversible. And then we're just mitigating damages as lawyers. We're not properly assisting the client in preventing the damages from happening in advance.
That's exactly right.
Isn't it? And it's sad. And, you can go to Office Depot, any Office Depot, and buy certain forms that have instructions how to use, but they're general forms. They sell that same form in Florida, in New York, in New Jersey. It's not necessarily going to incorporate proper language address certain statute requirements that are relevant to Florida. Isn't that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And you can even have a good form. I went into one of those postal places where they, send packages, and there was a spindle, and I saw my form. My document.
Isn't that funny?
Right, but if you don't know how to use it, if you're not able to title assets in the right way, or have the provisions that are meaningful for you in that document, it can be more harmful than helpful.
And that's a big problem. I see that a lot in mediated agreements with mediators that are not lawyers. I see it a lot in people who do agreements between themselves and sign it and have it notarized, and they have a document and they didn't do financial disclosure, so it's not really valid in court. We're down to the last 2 minutes. I just wanted to bring up one quick thing. Let's talk about waivers. Certain states have these types of Medicaid waivers and some don't, and Florida is one of them.
Right. You're referring to home and community-based services and those types of waivers?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be able to help better protect, if you elect these waivers, then it's another level of protection. Is that correct?
Well, it pays for a whole other body of care. So Medicaid waivers are programs that depart from the normal federal formula so that states can do more for their residents.
Okay, I understand. Is there a waiver that you can elect that says we're not going to apply these state laws, we're going to apply some other state laws?
No. If you're in Florida, and that's a very good point, for Medicaid purposes, the moment you step foot in a state, you are a resident of that state for Medicaid purposes. So this holds true especially for seniors who get divorced, who move back to the state where their children are, for example. That's important to recognize that they're still going to be able to get help, albeit under that state's laws and rules.
And each state has different rules.
We have 51 different Medicaid programs in the United States.
Wow. So you can tell that this is a huge area of law for any of the seniors out there that are considering a divorce. I highly recommend that you call Scott's office for a consult, and I really think that he's the go-to guy for everything elder. You will be able to find Scott's information on our website at divorceconnectionnetwork.com. Scott, thanks so much for coming down and spending some time with me today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad to have you, and thanks for watching.